Well, I'm glad you could join us again for another True Crime Files of Los Angeles Inside Story. For the last so many podcasts, we have been talking about various problems or criticism people have made about the criminal justice system. And we've examined them. One was the mentally ill people who have cases, and they go through the court system. Then we talked about sentencing and how there's issues coming up about the appropriate sentences. But the last couple of podcasts, we've been talking about narcotics and drug cases and how that has affected the criminal justice system. Because back when I started, back in the 1960s, in the criminal justice system, there weren't that many drug cases. Eventually, more cases came in as the legislature passed more restrictive laws on drugs. The sentences got longer, and there were more arrests and more cases. Spent a lot of time on drug cases because there's a lot of hearings because there are search and seizure issues that come up that have to be litigated in court. And that will take hours, sometimes days. And I remember trying many drug cases. Jurors sometimes, have some questions about drug cases, whether that's appropriate or not. So, yes, I tried a lot of cases and I know a lot about them. But back when I first started in the 60s, heroin was the main possession for use as well as for sale of heroin. Then cocaine became very popular. And I guess became the predominant drug case. At the same time, in the 70s and 80s, we had a lot of PCP cases. And that was where people felt they were invincible. They were so strong, they could do things. A lot of side effects, very dangerous, PCP. Then we had LSD, a certain number of those, like the Charles Manson. It was kind of a hippie thing. But very dangerous. But the ones that we were inundated with were the Seconal cases. They were called the Reds. The red capsules that people took. And we also had the whites. That would be the amphetamines, the bennies. All of these were felonies. Felonies, and that meant there had to be a preliminary hearing, and there had to be a trial on them, as well as hearings as far as whether things were confiscated legally. On top of all of that, we had the marijuana cases, and a lot of people were experimenting with marijuana, using marijuana, getting caught with marijuana, and that was a felony. So that took a lot of time to handle all of that. Eventually, all of the states came up with schedules as to the different drugs. The federal schedule is a little different from most of the states. The federal one, marijuana, is a Schedule 1. California does not. Schedule 1. Schedule 1 in California, that would be your opiates, your heroin, and things of that nature. So the schedule spelled out the seriousness of the drug and what sentence would be imposed. Now, drug dealing goes on all the time in various places, and heroin, as I say, was the main drug that was being sold on the streets, and then cocaine became very, very popular. And we have two types of drug dealers. The one that we deal a lot with are the street dealers, and they may be selling what we call dime bags, for $10 or $20. A small amount. And we also have the big dealers, and those very often are like cartels from Mexico, different areas, and they bring the drugs in very often in cars, trucks, sometimes fly them in, sometimes bring them by boats. Large quantity of drugs come into the country, and the DEA, which is responsible, the Drug Enforcement, to put a stop to it, to control it. And It's sometimes very difficult because there are so many ways that drugs can be brought in. Now, I want to talk about a specific case, a case that I did a lot of work on, to give you an idea what is involved in a drug case. It involves an Asian group that was selling heroin, large quantities of heroin, and Cow was his name, a big dealer, and the DEA agents set up a buy with him, and it was for $80,000. And any type of buy, both sides kind of distrust the other, and Cow, the dealer, he wanted to make sure that these buyers, who are the undercover agents, had cash. They don't accept credit cards. It has to be cash. And they did a flash, meaning they showed that there was $80,000 in cash that they had on them. So that was done at a restaurant in Monterey Park. So once the dealer was certain that they had the money, then they went outside, and the agents were not aware of the fact that there were other people involved in this dealing, and they were in the parking lot, and they kept driving around, checking on things, and eventually it was agreed that they would leave Monterey Park, go through Alhambra up to Pasadena, I think it was Marengo, that the transaction was going to take place. And as the DEA agents are driving in their undercover car with Cow in the back, the dealer, Cow says, no, stop right there. The drugs are in that garage over there. Stop. And they do. They pulled to the curb. They didn't realize there was a car directly behind them, this little red car. And as soon as, they stopped, Cow gets out and he pulls a gun. He points the gun and demands the money. In other words, he was doing a rip-off. Here, the dealer was trying to rip off these buyers who were agents. And another person from that red car comes running up with his gun, and all of a sudden they start shooting the agents. And they're shot. 2 of the DEA agents are shot right there in their car. The other one is able to escape. Then they reach in and grab the money, and there's the $80,000 in cash, and they pull it out, and they run back and get in that car, and then they take off. They take off going through the streets of San Marino, and they're weaving around. By this time, law enforcement realized that something had gone wrong. It was a ripoff, and they started following that red car through San Marino. And it was kind of unusual because San Marino is a very wealthy place. That was where Huntington had his mansion. The Huntington Library is located there. And General Patton, he was raised in San Marino. Very nice area. And here you have a pursuit of of the red car by the law enforcement. And eventually they get behind the car, and the car goes up on the curb and gets stuck on the curb. And then a shootout occurs. The dealers, the rip-off people in the red car start shooting at the DEA agents. So the gun battle goes on, and eventually the people in the car are all shot. One of them survives, 2 of them did not. But when they went and checked on the car, there was the money. The $80,000 in cash was all there. So just to show you the firepower that those dealers had was, they both, 2 of them had 38s and one of them had a 45, and all of those guns had been used to shoot at law enforcement. Well, okay, what's the result of it? Unfortunately, here was an undercover buy of $80,000 of heroin, and 2 DEA agents lost their lives in the process, and 2 of the dealers were killed. So yes, it's not easy to crack down on drugs. Very, very hard to make these undercover buys. Now I want to talk about another case involving a young man, Chad. He was 17 years old. He got hooked on meth, and he just couldn't get off of it. And just to show you an illustration, These are the drugs that make up meth. I mean, it's toxic. But there are people who get hooked and addicted to it, and they just can't stop. He started dealing meth in his community, in his high school. If anybody wanted meth, they would contact Chad, and he would supply it. He made money off of it. Now, everything was going fine, and one day Chad is driving along in his pickup truck, and a police officer pulls him over because his registration, his tags on his license wasn't up to date. So the officer says, "Hey, do you mind if I search your car?" And Chad didn't know what to do, and he said, "Go ahead, that's fine." And he did, and the officer finds a bindle of meth, and then he arrests him. Now, Chad's taken down to the station, and their narcotic officers are there, and they talk to Chad and say, "Well, what do you know?" "Yeah, he said, yeah, I do know a little bit about it. Yes, I have been dealing with it." They said, "If you want to help us out and be an informant for us, we'll drop the charges against you." Now, Chad and his mother agreed. Okay, he would do some drug deals for the police, and that would take care of it. And he did it. He made a few drug deals. However, he never could climb up high enough and get the high-level dealers. So the police said, "Look, if you don't give us a high-level dealer, we're going to press the charges against you." So that put Chad in a very difficult situation. And he and his girlfriend went over to this drug house, and they're trying to find if there's some dealer they could learn about and they could turn to the police. And while they're there, there's 3 individuals that are staying there in this drug house. There's Martinez, Noriega, and Ibarra. And they're involved in drugs, especially meth. And they start asking questions. They said, "Hey, where you been? We hear that, you've been hooked up with the police. Are you a snitch?" And they started putting pressure on Chad. And they said, "You're a snitch. You're an informant for the police." And they started beating him. And they said, "You give us some money. Give us money and we'll leave you alone." Well, they went to an ATM and he couldn't get any money out of the ATM. And so they said, "Okay, we're going to have to kill you." And they did kill him. And they took and dumped his body in an alleyway over in Los Angeles. Now, that was bad enough. They take his girlfriend, they take her up into the mountains. It was nighttime. It was way up high in the mountains. And they're trying to strangle her, trying to get rid of her. And she's not dying. They can't kill her. So the one lady there, Noriega, she takes a gun and she shoots the girlfriend. And the girlfriend's standing on, it's a little embankment, and she falls over down into the embankment. It's very dark. She kind of disappears there. They can't find her. And she survives, although she had been shot in the head, and eventually was able to testify against Noriega, Martinez, and Ibarra. So you think about it, Chad got involved in meth. He started dealing it. He got caught by the police. He became an informant for the police. And then he got caught by the other dealers, and they came after him as a snitch. Wow. Was it worth it? Well, no, it certainly wasn't worth it for their lives and so forth. Now, I want to go into another case that I worked on, and it involves the Mexican Mafia. Now, that's Emmy. And one of the things about the Mexican Mafia, they have an agreement with all Hispanic gangs that if they're dealing drugs, which they all are, they are to pay 10% to the Mexican Mafia. And that's just the rule. And all the gangs know that because they are protected if they, sell their give the 10% to the Mexican Mafia. They have a territory. Nobody else can use that territory. So they feel protected, secure about it. However, we have this one dealer down in San Pedro. Dutton was his name, and he did not want to pay the 10% to the Mexican Mafia, and he just thumbed his nose at him. And his house was fortified. I mean, there's no way anybody could ever get in there. And he had a security guard there 24/7. There's always somebody with a gun protecting Dutton. So the Mexican Mafia, started looking pretty impotent because everybody knew that Dutton wasn't paying his, a fair share of 10%, and he's getting away with it. So why do they need to pay money to the Mexican Mafia? So the Mexican Mafia knew about this Ruben Gomez. Ruben Gomez, I think he went to school with Dutton. They knew each other way back when, and they got Gomez to meet with Dutton at his house, and they all meet there, and they're talking about maybe setting up a drug deal in the southern portion of San Pedro. So they're sitting around having drinks, and everything seems to be, compatible. And all of a sudden, Gomez stands up. He takes out a sawed-off shotgun out of his pant leg, and he points it at the security guard, and he shoots him. Kills him right then and there. So now Dutton didn't have any protection. He doesn't have anyone that's going to protect him. And what was interesting, Gomez just slowly turns the shotgun on Dutton and pulls the trigger. And then he blows his head off. The whole point was to send a message to all the drug dealers in Los Angeles area. If you don't pay your 10% tax to the Mexican Mafia, you're going to have your head blown off. So that word went out. Everybody started paying their taxes. Now there was another case I was involved in where this fellow Downey, who was a drug dealer, he did pay his 10% to the Mexican Mafia. And, he was doing what he was supposed to do. However, he wasn't paying it to Pee Wee Aguilar. Pee Wee said, hey, you're supposed to be paying me. And, Downey said, no, I'm supposed to pay this other Mexican Mafia cartel. And Aguilar sent the word out, he is to be taken care of. And he is. Downey was driving down the street. Some guys came up on the car next to him, and they just started shooting and killed him right then and there. Not that he wasn't paying his 10%. He wasn't paying it to the right person. So that shows you how violent drug dealing can be. And just to carry it another extreme, another case I worked on involved a Hispanic gang. It was the Maywood Locos, and they were into meth. They were selling meth. They were the major one in the East Los Angeles area dealing meth. And there was an undercover buyer that set it up to get a pound. He wanted to get a pound of meth, and the going rate was $13,000, $14,000. So they agreed on it. And then they got together so it could be tested to make sure that the meth was good. And it was. And it was good. And then it was on October 3rd, it was agreed that they would buy the meth, pay for the meth, and the transportation of it, the dealers from that gang go over to this auto shop. They go in the back room there, they get the meth, they come out, put it in the car, the trunk there, and they are taking it to the location for the deal. Now, the enforcer has his automatic weapon there, and it's loaded, ready to go. If anything goes wrong, they will be able to fight their way out. So they go over to this McDonald's parking lot. They pull in there, the buyer is there, the seller who negotiated, he's there, and it's 458 grams of pure methamphetamine. Wow. A good transaction. And the recipient of it all was the Maywood Locos. That gang, that was the way they supported their gang effort, was by selling meth. So it was kind of a gang conspiracy, and it was very, very profitable, and it worked out very well for the gang. Now, one other case, this will be the last one, but just to show you, what can happen in a gang situation, not a gang situation, but a meth situation. We have a buyer coming over and they want to get drugs, a huge amount. And this was a very large drug dealer, one of the largest ones on the west side of Los Angeles. And he's got all the drugs there and they want to sample it. The buyers sample it, check it out, and see it's good. And all of a sudden, they pull out these guns and they demand all of the dope and all of the money, all the cash. As soon as they got it all, they shot the dealer, killed him right then there on the floor of his kitchen, living room. Wow. But they had made it big. It was a big ripoff. They run out to their car, which was parked next to the house, and they had to park it there because it was trash day and there was no parking spaces on the street. So they parked it there. They came out, jumped in their car, and ready. Oh, wait. Somebody had closed the wrought iron gate and had locked it with a chain lock. There was no way they could get their car out of there. So they take the dope that they have and they start running, and they go from one trash can to another, and they dump the dope in it, because now they want to come back. They'll come back and pick it up later on. And it wasn't a good idea, but they had to leave their car there. So as soon as the police arrive, they find their car parked there. And they check the license plate and they run it, and they find out who the owner of that car was, and that was the killer. And his partner had come over, and he had left his address book with his name and address in there. So it was an easy case for the police to solve. So that gives you a flavor for the type of activity that occurs in drug deals. Very deadly, very dangerous, very violent. But another side of drug cases is there's always the issue of the confiscation, the seizure of the drugs, because drugs sometimes are small, and it may be a search of a vehicle. It may be the trunk or under the seat, and the police do a search. It's always an issue. Was it legally conducted? And a proper seizure. The same thing deals with a house. You might have an informant that says the drugs are being sold at this location. They get a search warrant. They go out there. And then there's going to be in court an issue. Did they have a search warrant, and did they properly execute the search warrant? And they also have the individual. When they stop somebody, they pat them down, and they may feel drugs in their pocket or in their purse, and that could be an issue that has to be litigated in court. So drug cases take a long time to go through the court system. Now, as to drugs, back in the 80s, it was a feeling, well, all we needed to do is just say no, and people would stop using drugs. Well, it really didn't work all that well. Maybe some people were deterred by it, but the steady stream of drug cases continued. And eventually, even President Obama, his words were, "The war on drugs has been an utter failure. End the war on drugs." Now, we started back in 1971, and we spent a lot of resources, not just court's time, but the police's time, and everyone's time on the war on drugs. We made a dent in it, and it was under control, but it didn't stop it, didn't end it. There always was a trickle of drugs coming in. But it was estimated it was like $43 billion a year just to fight the war. And some people have estimated it's over $1 trillion that has been spent on the war on drugs. Now, more recently, there has been a change in the public's attitude as to drugs being illegal. And there's been a movement to decriminalize the drug laws. And in many of the states it has happened where the drugs that were felonies have been reduced to misdemeanors or even to infractions. And the punishment is not prison, but it may be rehab facility. So there's a new philosophy as to what should be done with drugs, and there's two sides to it: decriminalization and legalization. Two different philosophies. It kind of all started with marijuana, and some of the states started a medical marijuana. And if you got a doctor's prescription, you could get marijuana. And then it was kind of a sham. And then it grew, and it grew, and then eventually it was be able to have marijuana legally. And you didn't have to go through the medical phase of it. Now, decriminalization, the argument is that it helps the community, it helps employment, housing, and people. It's so much better than putting them in the court system and giving them a record that may prevent them from getting jobs. Well, that's the philosophy of it. And part of what was driven it is the idea of the disparity in sentences. And there's no question that crack is, the sentence is much more severe than just straight cocaine. And there was reasons why it was made that way, but it was felt that discriminated against certain groups. Poorer people use crack. The Hollywood crowd, the rich people, use cocaine, but they had lighter sentences. Well, okay, that gives you kind of insight as to illegal drugs and how it's changing. However, a lot of comparisons are made between alcohol and drugs. Now, we know with alcohol, we had prohibition of alcohol. That didn't work out, and we had to get another constitutional amendment to bring it back. But the idea was to be able to control the use and the availability of alcohol. And it has to be controlled. Dealing with juveniles, and also driving under the influence. But the same needs to be done as far as drugs. The big problem is juveniles getting their hands on drugs, using them, and getting addicted to them, and also driving when they shouldn't be driving. Now, we have states that have decriminalized and are some legalizing. Oregon and Colorado are kind of in the forefront and have kind of set a trend for other states to follow suit. Now, the question is, are there less drug cases in the courts? Yeah, there are less cases coming through, and we have drug courts. So we have a lot of things that have changed in the criminal justice system. As I say, back in the 70s and 80s, we were inundated with drug cases, and it caused the courts to not function real well because they had too many cases and they couldn't handle the volume that was coming through. So we have less cases. However, is there a price in this? Drug use and addiction and overdoses are on the rise. So I think a lot needs to be thought about this decriminalization. And we need to work on control. We have to have some types of control on drugs. And I think the fentanyl crisis is a perfect example. When you make it wide open, there's going to be a lot of overdose. There's going to be a lot of people dying as a result of that. So a lot of thinking has to go into it, and hopefully over the next 10 years or so, we will come up with a better plan than we have right now, where we've gone in with a kind of like a meat cleaver, and we've chopped up the drug laws, but we haven't replaced them with sufficient controls for juveniles and driving under the influence. Well, hopefully you will join us again for another True Crime Files of Los Angeles Inside Story, when we confront another one of the issues of the criminal justice system. See you then.